This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex, and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We're going to talk again today. We're doing kind of a mini series here on the rules of co-parenting. And so we're going to talk about that again today. But the items we're going to talk about today are crucially important for parents to know. In fact, I think most of the time, George, the problems I have more to do with the items we're going to talk about today than any other items. But welcome, George.
Thank you, Dr. Marlene. Great to be with you always.
Yes,
Ready to
good to
learn.
have you. Well, we're ready to learn from you. I'll tell you that for sure. And I get super excited and worked up about this stuff because, like I said, this stuff represents the majority of the work I do with parents. They don't know the rules of co parenting, and they are frequently getting themselves in trouble, if you will, or just, creating chaos because they don't know the rules of co parenting. And so, the one I'm going to jump in, the one that I think is really, really important is the second one we're going to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and cover the first one. And this takes a little explaining or discussion because there's times when one parent needs to let the other parent know things, and there's times when you don't. And I think it's really important for parents to understand when you don't have to let the other parent know certain things. I'll just give you an example right now, and then we'll get into the things parents do need to let each other know. But if one parent is asking the other, maybe because that parent was always the one who took charge of this kind of stuff, but they're saying, when are parent teacher conferences at school this year? When is Christmas break or spring break at school this year? When does school get out for Thanksgiving break? You don't have to answer that stuff. I'm not saying a parent can't, although I wouldn't get it started because they'll rely on you for everything. But that's stuff that each parent can look up for him or herself. And they don't need the other parent to tell them. The way I always put it is, you are no longer the other parent's secretary. So you don't have to look up that kind of stuff for them and explain it to them or deliver the information. They can look it up for themselves and find out when whatever they want to know is occurring. I'll stop there. I mean, do you agree so far? There are certain things you just don't have to rely on the other parent for, and they should not rely on you for.
Absolutely. And it doesn't require a contempt citation to make those
Right?
things happen.
Right. Right. That's what we want to avoid here. In all of this stuff with the rules of co-parenting, we want to avoid parents being quick to file contempt because that doesn't go over well either.
No, and it's not
No.
helpful typically. It often makes things worse.
Yes, it does. Because as we talked about last week, and if people weren't watching last week, that can actually empower the other parent. If you file contempt and you lose, you often empower that other parent that they think, well, I'm not going to get in trouble for this, so I'll just go ahead and do that. And they keep up the behavior, even though it may not be the best behavior.
That's absolutely true. And the violation of co-parenting rules is typically, I mean, unless it's egregious, severe, or continuous, it's often better resolved with a parent coordinator decision maker.
Right, right. Because we can decide those kind of things. And so, yes, it's better resolved that way or address, not decide, but address. If one parent isn't doing what they're supposed to, I can address that with them. And, parents don't realize that and they're awfully quick to run back into court, and that just never goes well.
No, and it's expensive in terms of time, money, and emotion.
Yes, yes, especially emotion. I mean, time and money too, for sure. But what it does to the co parenting relationship is so destructive, you
Yeah, I
know?
would think so. It would make it more difficult. And again, we've got the situation where if the contempt citation is successfully prosecuted, then you have the situation of potentially the children asking, why did mom or dad put the other parent in jail?
Right, right. And you don't want to have to explain that to your children.
No.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk for a minute about things that parents do need to inform each other about. And that is anything that the parent wouldn't otherwise know. And so if the child gets in trouble at school and they have detention because of it, and it happens on your time, that's still something the other parent needs to know. Or, God forbid, if they get ticketed for shoplifting or picked up for underage drinking or things like that, that's stuff the other parent needs to know. And now I'm going to go back to the golden rule, which applies to all the rules of co parenting. Just treat that other parent the way you would want them to treat you if you were the one who didn't know. I'm going to let you take that from there.
Well, I think that's true. And certainly a parent has an obligation to notify the other parent about medical emergencies, uh, potentially some school problems, things of that nature. They have,
Yes.
I guess, an unwritten obligation to notify each other. Maybe it is written, though, in the co parenting materials, but they have an obligation to notify the other parent, certainly, of emergency things, medical things, occurrences like that. But day-to-day issues, if a child has a cold or something like that, I don't think that requires notification.
Right, right. Well, and the same with, and this will be a good segue into the next item, but the same with if a child stays home from school. I always tell the parent, because they're sick, I always tell the parent to let the other parent know as a courtesy. But I often get calls from the other parent saying, he or she kept my child home and didn't talk to me about it, and we have joint decision making. Well, that's a day to day decision. That is not a major decision. Is it good to let the other parent know? Of course. Just say, Bobby's home from school today. He's not feeling well. I haven't taken him to the doctor yet. If he gets worse, I might. If I do, I'll let you know. It's that simple. But you get parents on both ends, the one who doesn't think they need to, even as a courtesy, let the other parent know. And then the other parent who gets all worked up because they didn't consult me and we have joint decision making. Well, that's not a major decision. Joint decision making, and I'll let you explain this because I think you can explain it better, is in regard to major decisions, correct?
Absolutely. And they typically encompass educational decisions, major educational decisions, such I would think perhaps holding a child back for to repeat a grade would probably be a major educational decision, religious upbringing, if any, and medical decisions. And those are the three major areas of decision making that are typically talked about.
Yes, yes. And you explain that very well. Like, those are great examples of holding a child back a year or what school they go to, whether it's private or public or, that kind of thing, but not whether you keep them home one day. That's not a major medical or educational decision.
No, no. And there is a distinction there, and parents need to use some judgment to decide what is major and what is minor, and it should be fairly obvious.
You would think. And again, it doesn't hurt to have a parenting coordinator on your case just in case you aren't sure. Because when you're not using us, you don't pay for us. But if you need to know the answer to something, it's a heck of a lot easier, cheaper, faster to have a parenting coordinator decision maker on your case so that we can tell you in short order whether that's something you need to do or not. A little preventive maintenance goes a long way here.
Absolutely. And again, if parents would just think, how would I like to be treated in this situation?
Right.
It really is just how would you like to be treated? Uh, and then treat the parent that way. That would go a long way to resolve a lot of conflicts.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And when it comes to the more egregious things I mentioned, like getting caught shoplifting or getting caught with alcohol, underage drinking. Those things you definitely want to know about. And so if they happen on your time, don't get caught up because here's what often happens, George, you and I both know it. These teenagers, especially, will say, please don't tell my dad. Please don't tell my dad, or don't tell my mom. She'll be upset. Don't tell her. I'll be in trouble. And we get caught up in that as parents. We want our children to love us and trust us and confide in us. But you can't do that. You cannot keep that kind of information from the other parent. That will come back on you every time.
Yeah, excuse me. I think that's true. Parents have to discharge that obligation to notify the other parent of significant occurrences. Uh, and it's a kind of a common sense distinction between what's a major and what's a minor decision.
Right, right. And again, if you aren't sure, contact your PC or PCDM, whichever you have. Some states, and I'm going to just take a minute to explain that. Some states have the decision maker designation, some do not. Some it's only a parenting coordinator. But either way, that person can tell you what the rule is and they can keep you out of trouble. And if you weigh paying a PC or PCDM and weighing your attorney because now you got to go back to court, no offense to you, George, being the attorney, but I think you would agree it's going to be cheaper every time to not go back to court.
There's no question it's going to be cheaper in terms of time, money, and emotion.
Yes,
Those three
yes,
things are
yes.
spent. Capital there is spent to go back to court. And people should understand that lawyers are not trained to be healers.
Right.
That's where the presence of a mental health professional is invaluable. I think your orientation is more toward being a healer. Mine is more toward being a combatant. And so we don't spend that much time and effort learning to be a healer. That's just not our role.
Right.
But if we can counsel the client, we can advise the client, we can encourage the client, but ultimately it's the client's responsibility to decide and define what their goals are for the representation. And then we're obligated to seek those goals.
Yes, yes. And I'm going to take a detour here and talk for a minute about something you said earlier about these things typically aren't written down. That is true. That is why we have problems with them. These are things that don't usually make it into your order. And so if it isn't in your order, you don't have any idea. And a little education goes a long way. Like the stuff that we're talking about, I am taking straight out of the level 2 co parenting class that I teach for the courts in Colorado Springs. They are similar in any town or city across the country. They may not all be the exact same, there might be variations, And you, of course, want to hire someone in your area, your location. But just knowing that information or take a class in your location. I'm not asking people in New York City to take my class because it might not all apply. But certainly you can find a class, you can find a PC or a PCDM in your location and utilize those resources. It just amazes me how people don't educate themselves and then they get upset with the quote unquote system because they find themselves in trouble. And I'm like, well, that's your fault. You have to learn how to do this. Just as we all have to learn to drive a car, we have to learn how to co parent.
I think that's true. And just like children don't come with an owner's manual, co-parenting doesn't come with an owner's manual, especially. It's a learned skill. And I think an example to me of somebody who had a good co-parenting relationship is yourself.
Yes, yes, we did. We do. Our child's 36, but yes, he was 6 when we divorced. And so we had a lot of years, it's 12 years until he became an adult that we had to co parent. And there's an art to it for sure. But part of it is just following these rules and knowing what they are because they aren't rocket science. Even though we um, raised a rocket scientist, these rules these rules are not rocket science. But we did. My son is a mechanical and aerospace engineer. And so we raised a rocket scientist, but these rules are simple and they're basic. And this is not hard stuff. It's a matter of caring enough to educate yourself to know what the rules are.
Yeah, I think that's true. And the first resort that I tell people when you have a question is look at your decree, look at your order and
Yes.
see if it addresses what you're having problems with. That's the first resort, I think, for people is to
Mhm.
check that order.
Oh, I agree. And I can't tell you how many times as I'm teaching the co parenting class that I will tell parents, I mean, it's almost like every other item we cover. I will say, unless your order says otherwise, unless your order says otherwise, because sometimes people do put these in their order, and what they put in may or may not be consistent with what we teach in class because there may be extenuating circumstances. There might be a restraining order or something like that. And so, what we teach the average person may not be what we teach every person.
Yeah, I think that's true. And most of these rules are fairly universally applicable, but there are
Yes.
exceptions. Certainly, we understand that for violence, abuse, active alcoholism, addiction, things like that. We're not talking about those types of problems in this
No,
context.
no, we're talking the average, everyday, run of the mill parenting plan or situation. And yeah, there's always going to be exceptions. And that's why I just beat it into people's heads that you got to make sure your order doesn't say otherwise. And it amazes me how many people don't know what their order says. I'm
Well, I
shocked by
think
that.
that's true. The other thing that comes to my mind is that creates a problem is when the biological parent says, "Hey, my new spouse can deal with that." Now
Right?
we've got an invitation to problems.
Right. Right. Big time, because I mean, we could do a whole show on, and maybe we will sometime soon, do a whole show on step parenting because and blended families because there are rules around that too. And we don't go into real depth in class about step parenting. But yes, there are certain things that you can't designate to your new mate to do that should be one of the parents doing it.
No, I
for
think
sure.
that's true. And deferring to the new spouse or mate or partner can really cause some problems. It's not a designated thing that can be deferred. It's a responsibility that needs to be assumed by the parent.
That is correct, for sure. Well, time to take a quick break. So, this is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Before we went to break, we were talking about the troubles that co-parents can cause, that step-parents can cause because they overstep their boundaries and parents defer to them. And like I said, I think maybe we'll do a show about that sometime soon. And so be watching for that. That's a big one because even if parents don't think they're going to remarry, they will. Or even if they don't remarry, they will have significant others in their lives. They're not going to remain single and celibate and all of that. And so there will be somebody around in the future, statistics show. And it's a high percentage, like 96 or something like that. And I'm making that number up. But you get my point that how you handle the step parent situation is crucially important, and it's going to happen at some point to everyone.
Yeah, I think what I would call some of those parental responsibilities are non-delegable
Yes,
to the step
yes,
parent.
yes. And one I can think of off the top of my head is doling out discipline, especially spanking, physical discipline. That should never be done by a step parent. But I say even things like taking away privileges or putting kids in timeout or whatever, unless the other parent isn't there. I don't think step parents should do that because it's only going to create resentment from the child. They're going to go back and tell the other parent, and that parent's going to often, not always, but often get all worked up about that. And often an argument is on about that. There's a lot of conflict that occurs around what step parents do in the other house.
I think that's true, and judges are typically frustrated when there's a step parent issue. Uh, my experience has been that judges don't particularly like that. They don't have a magic solution for it. And here again, I think people would do much better most of the time working with the parent coordinator, decision maker, or parent coordinator than running back to court on a contempt citation.
Right.
Contempt citation is a remedy that should be used sparingly and in an egregious or repetitive situation.
Yes. Yes. And we have a particular judge here who handles contempts. And I'll just say, and I don't know if this is, kind of standard because of the nature of contempts, but he's not a very pleasant person to be in front of. And I don't mean that in a bad way towards him. It's just the nature of contempts. When you get in front of a contempt judge, that's not usually very pleasant.
No, it's not pleasant at all. And for all concerned, it's typically a very difficult proceeding. It ramps up anger, frustration, and fear,
Mhm.
anxiety. All those things are going to be encountered in a contempt citation. It's
Yes.
not a fun proceeding by any matter of means.
Right. Right. Well, and the judge right off the bat is approaching it with a negative attitude, if you will, because of their very fact that you're there, that somebody has done something that was not following the order. And, judges will tell you my orders are not suggestions, they're orders.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's true. And judges, they don't particularly like contempt proceedings either.
No, no, they don't. They especially, I think, don't like, or maybe they do like, putting people in jail.
No, it depends on how egregious the behavior is.
Correct. Correct. I would agree with that for sure. Okay, let's jump into the next item of co-parenting, the rules of co-parenting, because this one's a big one. And I said earlier I would save it for second. And I've got a list here that I'm going to read off. But the rule is that co-parents are expected to respect the boundaries of the other parent and not interfere with the parenting time of that parent. They don't need to interject themselves into the parenting time of that parent. And what the item says is each parent is the head of their own household and as a result is allowed to make decisions within that household without consulting the other parent or getting permission from the other parent. And I'll read the list of items, but I'm going to stop there and just let you comment on that. Each parent should be able to parent autonomously, correct?
Absolutely, and you're not going to have. I think it's particularly difficult for parents who have been the traditional major caretaker or provider for the children,
Yes.
for them to let go of that control or some of that control when the
Mhm.
child is with the other parent can be very difficult.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. That is what is the most difficult about this. Is you'll have one parent who, as you said, was the primary caregiver when the parents were together. Well, that's all going to change. And so if you were the one who took care of the kids and the household and the pets or whatever, both parents are going to have to do that on their parenting time. And if you were the one who took care of the yard and things like that, again, both parents are going to have to do those things. So just because of the fact that you took care of the children, you now have to share in that responsibility. And this is a more important point, you have to let the other parent do it as they see fit.
Well, I think both parents often encounter severe changes in their roles. So you
Yes.
have someone who was a primary caretaker now is also a breadwinner, and vice
Yes.
versa. So the parents are going through their own changes and struggles to adapt to those changes At the same time, they're trying to adapt to co-parenting, which is a different relationship in the best of circumstances.
Right, right. It's changed no matter how you look at it. But you are absolutely right. Sometimes you've got one parent who stayed at home and took care of the children in the house and all that. And then because of that, or to allow for that, the other parent maybe worked two jobs or worked long hours to get some overtime or something to be able to afford all of that and have that other parent stay home. And so now the parent who was staying home is probably going to have to go back to work. And the parent who was maybe working two jobs is no longer going to have to work two jobs or not work such long hours. And so it is a change in both parents' roles.
I think that's true. And for some people, they deal with that change better than others. That's the way I would put it. And some people adapt faster, better, easier than others do when they face changing those roles.
Yes, that's right. And none more so than the care of the children. And I have parents who, like I said, they get really worked up about what the other parent is or is not doing in their household in regard to the way they raise the children. I'm going to give you a list of items that each parent is expected to let the other parent handle in whatever fashion they deem appropriate. And this is not an all inclusive list. In fact, it says this includes but is not limited to, but here's a few decisions on chores, allowances, television watching, video games, bedtimes, homework, food, and clothing. That's just a small list, short list of the decisions that each parent gets to make about the children. And the other parent has no say so in those aspects.
Yeah, I think otherwise you get the situation where one parent is complaining that the absentee parent is trying to interfere, and a helicopter parent
Mhm.
and control. If I'm the complaining parent, I say they're trying to control me, and that control thing is a big issue for a lot of people.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And as a woman, I think I can say this and get away with it. You would not be able to, but I can. It is usually the mom. You know, moms have traditionally been the caregivers, the primary caregivers of the children. And this is not always the case. I want to make sure people hear this is not always the case. But I would say more times than not, it's the mom who has trouble letting go of parenting just because we usually do it, or do more of it. So
I think
just
that's
saying.
true, and the parent who is facing that is often very threatened by what's going on and the
Yes.
changes in those roles. And really, I, I I'm frustrated in the sense that I really don't deal with that. The dramatic
Right.
change that is going on in people's lives and roles is is really not my concern. And that's why I'm delighted to have a mental health professional on the case because
Yes.
I think you do bring an orientation of a healer to the issues, whereas I bring to the role of combatant to those issues.
Right, right. I mean, let's face it, that's true. It really is. It really is true. There's two items in that list that I do want to talk about for a minute because sometimes parents don't realize you do have a remedy if the other parent is doing certain things. And those two are the video games and the television watching. How much your kids watch television or play video games, the court does not care about. However, content may be an issue. And what I'm talking about is when children are watching age inappropriate um, TV shows, movies, playing age inappropriate video games. And then as a consequence, they're behaving aggressively or, inappropriately in some way. The court will care about that. They will care. And there's an item that I have often put in a parenting plan or asked the court to order in a certain case. And what it says is both parents will observe the age appropriate rating guidelines for movies, videos, and other media. And that kind of covers everything. It covers TV shows and movies and, any type of like video games, any of that. And I have yet, knock on wood, but I don't even think I need to. I have yet to have a judge say, no, we're not going to order that. If it is asked for, it has been ordered 100% of the time when I've asked for it.
I think that's typically true, and it gives the judge kind of an easy uh, guideline to lay down for people, is to
Yes.
follow the guidelines for the appropriateness, age appropriate media. And that's pretty broad and covers it.
Right. Well, it covers anything that's going to be problematic to the child.
Right.
If they're exhibiting sexualized behavior at a young age or aggressive behavior, and then you find out they're watching violent shows or playing aggressive or violent video games or things that have inappropriate content for their age, in a sexualized way or something like that. I mean, it's just a no-brainer that the court's going to protect the children in regard to stuff like that.
I think that's true, and of course that is the judge's primary focus, is the best of what's best for the children. And so
Yes.
sometimes parents who tend to have a laissez-faire approach to parenting will
Mhm.
be oblivious to the fact that their child or children are watching age inappropriate media. And so they have to step up a little bit their game as far as being involved parents.
That's right. And I have a perfect example, a real life example of that. This was a case of mine. I've told this story before. But in a case of mine years ago, when that movie Child's Play was popular, I had a little boy, he was 6, and he drew Chucky, and Chucky had a knife drawn up above his head and drops of blood dripping off the end of the knife and a pool of blood on the floor, and drew this at school and wrote Chucky beneath it. Well, come to find out, Dad, unbeknownst to him, um, had allowed this kid to watch it because his older son, who was old enough to watch it, he was, 16, 17, was watching it in his home one night and didn't realize the other child was watching. And he was abhorred when he found out that Bobby had snuck in to where Zach was sitting and was watching him play, watching him watch this movie, or watching this movie with him, I should say. And Dad didn't have any idea. And like I said, he was abhorred at that thought and horribly embarrassed. But it happens. And sometimes we don't know every single thing our kids are doing or watching, looking at on either TV or the computer or whatever. And so, like you said, you can't be too cautious. You got to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening within your household.
I think that's very true, and sometimes parents are exhausted.
Yes.
They're trying to parent, they're trying to hold down employment, and so sometimes they just defer to, there's a vacuum there, if you will,
Yeah.
of parenting. And so, as difficult as it may be, they need to be aware of what their kids are doing in that sense.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it is time for another quick break. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Before we went to break, we were talking about parents allowing older children in the household to kind of keep an eye on younger children, and we all know sometimes we just have to do that. But what we were talking about with a parent not realizing a younger child was watching an age-inappropriate movie is a reason why you have to be really careful what you let your older children do in terms of parenting and watching the children, providing guidance to the children. And you brought up, I'm going to say that it was your thought, because it was, you brought up that this especially becomes complicated when it's a step sibling who's providing care for a younger step sibling, because you might have different rules. Like the parent, one parent might have certain rules and the step parent has a little bit different rules. And a lot of times parents and the new step parent have not figured those things out yet. Like they don't realize what things one parent might let their kids watch that the other parent absolutely does not let them watch. But it becomes a source of contention between the step family, the step, let's say, mom, and the step brother, let's say, in what they're allowing this other child to do. That was your thoughts. I'll let you talk about it, because that is such a point well made.
Well, I think when parents introduce new children, I guess, to their own children, and they have step siblings, this is one of the areas where I would hear a lot of friction and conflict. My ex does so and so, and my current spouse doesn't agree with that. So we immediately have a problem, and to head that off, the parent needs to understand that they're the parent, the step parent is not.
Right.
And so those things need to be worked out, and it's really artful to be a good step parent.
It is. That's for sure. But it can cause a lot of resentment for children toward their new step parent or a step sibling when they're telling them what to do and it's not consistent with what the parent has always told them to do or let them do or not let them do.
Right. I think that's true. And they end up in my office, or used to end up in my office,
Yeah.
complaining about it. And a judge is not going to put somebody in jail because of those types of frictions. I think a judge
Yeah.
realizes that most people, they're going to have some adjustments to make when the family dynamic changes. And every little thing is not something to be brought back before the court.
That's right. And I've even had parents come in and tell me that this had happened in the other household, and they want the court to tell that other parent that they can't have their new spouse around their children. And that is rarely going to happen.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. It's kind of like the judge's attitude is things happen in life, people go through changes, deal with it.
Yes.
And that's
Yes, exactly. What did you think was going to happen when you got divorced and you each got remarried, or whatever it may be? Yeah. That is very much their attitude. And people just get incensed about that kind of thing. But it's like I told someone this over the weekend. The court is not going to micromanage your life. I said that over the
absolutely.
weekend. Just yeah, yeah.
Absolutely true. And sometimes when parents argue about child support and there are stepchildren involved, then the judge is asked to allocate resources between the natural children and the stepchildren. And I've heard judges say, I'm not going to count the beans in the can.
Right. Right. They're really not going to get involved in stuff like that. And that's what parents don't realize. They dig their heels in and don't want to co parent cooperatively. It's like, no, I don't need to speak to her or him ever again. Well, if you have children at home, yes, you do.
Yeah,
So,
you do. And again, once that friction arises, there's a cry for that PCDM, I think.
yes.
Uh, that should be the first resort of people to resolve some of these problems as opposed to court.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and something parents don't realize when I first tell them, the parents I work with, when I'm in the capacity of PCDM, I tell them, I'm not going to make you go to my class, but I'm going to sit down with each of you and we're going to go over the handouts so you know what the rules of co parenting are. And they bristle at first and resist. And then I explain, I'm not going to make you sit down together and do this. I want you to speak freely. I want each of you to speak freely. So we do it separately. Well, then they are much more accepting of that and much less resistive about doing that because the resistance I get sometimes is, like I am not going to sit in a room for 4 hours with that person or whatever. And I don't make them do it that way. And so be receptive to learning what you need to know and stop freaking out about things because I just see parents, co-parents really freaking out about things. They overreact to things. And it's just like, wow, we really need to not go that far overboard when something very normal and typical and common happens.
Well, and that's the thing. People would bring to my office complaints about how the other parent is parenting, and I would have to tell them, that's their choice. That's
Yeah.
up to them how they parent when the kids are with them. And unless it's a very serious matter or something where they have an obligation to notify you, you really
Mhm.
don't have a say in how that parent parents when the children are with him or her.
Yes. And I would say in co-parenting, as we've talked about throughout the hour today, that is the number one obstacle to co-parenting effectively is parents just don't want to let go. They don't want to accept that at certain times, anytime the children are with the other parent, you are not going to have control over what happens.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and they need to come to terms with losing that control, or the feeling of losing that control.
Yes. Yes. And there's counselors out there that will let you vent and help you work through it, but you've got to accept it.
Yeah, I think that's true, and sometimes it's very difficult for parents to accept the reduction, I guess, in their role.
Yes. Yes, it definitely is. But our takeaway today is you're going to have to.
Yes, yes. And
Well,
again,
thank you. Go ahead.
I would say just you've got to remember to love your children more than you hate your ex.
Oh, yes, that's right. That is right. That's a good ending. But we are at the end of our time. So thank you again, George, and we'll see you all next week. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.